The only shame of what we're discussing tonight is we didn't get to hear Arlene Sorkin and Kevin Conroy bring it home as Harley Quinn and Bruce Wayne as we discuss Harley Quinn Season 3, Episode 8, Batman Begins Forever. R.I.P. Arlene Sorkin and Kevin Conroy.
The Mark of Zorro. I came out of that theater exhilarated, inspired even. So much so I refused to take the limo back. I wanted us to walk home through Crime Alley.
To think all this trauma from an Antonio Banderas film.
No, that's the 90s one. I'm talking about the black and white. It doesn't matter. Everything I do as Batman is to make that one night right. Yet it's never enough. So I must never forget. That is my penance, my bat-shaped cross to bear.
Moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It means healing. And as your therapist, I promised to help you heal.
Either you give up the kid so he can return to Crime Alley, or I shoot you dead. Your call, Quinn.
I thought your rule was no guns.
I mean, the real me is against it, but the mind me is flexible.
Help me. I will, but I can't help you in here. I need to talk to the real you. It's too fucked up in here.
Come on, champ. Let's go watch our parents die. It's what we deserve.
Like I said, very fucked up.
Don't tell my secret.
Doctor-patient confidentiality.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Superhero Pantheon. On this podcast, we usually take one movie and determine whether it belongs in the Pantheon, pile of shame, or somewhere in between. Tonight, we are doing something special. We are taking one episode of a TV show and determining whether it belongs in the Pantheon. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Blue Sky. I will give my Blue Sky address next week. Hopefully, by the time we are recording our next episode, Brian will also be on it. But we are shifting our social media attention. You could find additional episodes of this podcast through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcast apps through the real world. Please leave a 4 or 5 star review. So to help people discover this show. My co-host for this week and every week will be Brian DeBrain. Brian, all I could say is this is an episode that I have insisted upon for the last year or so, basically. I said, I don't know if Harley Quinn Season 3 deserves to go into the Pantheon, but this episode specifically is worth a discussion. Brian, after watching this episode, I want to get your initial thoughts. Batman Begins Forever.
Loved it. It's so deep and like layered, and there's all these Easter eggs, and there's all these different connections in a strange kind of way. I mean, for instance, let's just, right off the bat, the Batman Begins Forever, Batman Forever had the Riddler. The Riddler was played by Jim Carrey. This episode is inspired by Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, starring Jim Carrey. So yeah, there's a lot going on, and I love the concept. How many times have we gone into people's heads? Like 2 or 3 times? I think it's 1 time per season. They go into someone's head, and they picked a special one this time around. And I mean, you say that this could be like its own kind of movie, maybe, like if you stretch it out, maybe. I totally agree, and it works because the concept of this is so, I don't know, it's ridiculous, but it's awesome at the same time. And they got Frasier references, and I know how much Frasier Crane means a lot to me and Jerome because we're big Cheers fans, and he's a big Frasier guy. I've watched select episodes of Frasier. I'm more of like Frasier and Cheers kind of guy, but still. All those references, and you got Dr. Psycho coming back. I love that character, Dr. Psycho. He's so fucking awesome. I think he's super underrated, and everything kind of just came together for this episode. And they even made fun of CGI mustaches, which is just incredible. It
is incredible. I would agree with you on that. And all I could say is that this is an episode that really dives into the lore of Batman, and I know the word lore for me has a kind of a negative connotation, but in terms of this episode specifically, they are really playing with this idea of Bruce Wayne and his parents dying, like the ultimate core memory, especially if you're an Inside Out fan. I'm sure that is going to mean a lot to you. But this idea of Batman's parents being killed We have seen it so many times on screen. We saw it in the very first Batman in 1989. We saw a version of it in Batman Forever and Mask of the Phantasm and Batman vs. Superman and Batman Begins. Like, we've seen it so many times. And this episode is both a direct callback to the number of times that we've seen this happen on screen, but also we are kind of diving into the fact of, like, what does this actually mean? Like the fact that his parents have died so much, like, what does it actually mean at this point? And this episode has the guts to really explore what that means. And I think that's the primary reason that I think this is worth exploring. And to me, and it's worth noting that when we talk about the villain is Batman. The villain is Bruce Wayne in this case. And with where this season ends, which we'll get into towards the end of our podcast here tonight, I think it's really worth thinking about, like, the fact that Bruce Wayne does all of this, tries to resurrect his parents, because he becomes Batman, all because he refuses to deal with his shit. And I think that's what Harley Quinn in so many ways has been about, is so many people not wanting to deal with their shit and the ramifications of what happens when you don't do that. And I think that this show is kind of brave for doing that. And again, we're talking about a mainstream animated series. We're not talking about, like, something obscure, but the Harley Quinn character, to me, has become one of the more relevant Batman characters. I mean, you just look at the interpretations of it ever since her original debut in 1992. You look at the fact that, you know, Arlene Sorkin has played her, Kaley Cuoco has played her. Like, there's a Batman versus Harley Quinn animated movie. There is Harley Quinn. Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn has been in 3 different movies. Gaga is going to be playing Harley Quinn in a Joker musical, for God's sake. So just, it is 30 years, just how relevant Harley Quinn is. I mean, at this point, we've probably had as many interpretations of Harley Quinn as we have of Robin, and Robin has been around for such a significantly longer period of time. But this is it's a pretty remarkable piece, and you really do have to watch the rest of the season to appreciate, like, the reasons why they're doing this, why they end up going into Bruce Wayne's head and doing this exploration. So you can't necessarily watch this on its own and have the full appreciation. But for me, Brian, this is an episode that is well worth investing in this season of television just to get to this episode, in my view.
Yeah, and I think it's hands down. I mean, I've seen all 3 seasons up to this point. I haven't watched anything in season 4 yet, and I haven't seen the Valentine's Day special yet. But up to this point, I would definitely say it's the best episode they did. Best writing, for sure. And just exploring both characters of Harley Quinn and Batman. I just love the fact that Harley went back to being a psychiatrist. And, like, yeah, because I felt at the beginning of the season she was getting away from that, but that's because she's in this new relationship with Poison Ivy. So, you know, when you're in a new relationship, or, you know, you kind of want to impress your mate so much, and you kind of go over the top a little bit, you know what I mean? Kind of lose a part of yourself a little bit until you start settling in. But, you know, once Harley starts settling in, becomes the therapist that she is, and at the heart of what she is a therapist, you know what I mean? Psychiatrist. And it's like, we went back to that finally, you know what I mean? And she's, like, there to help young Bruce in his own head. Great stuff. And then I just love the fact that, like, you know, it's like a babyface turn as well. You know what I mean? It's like this long episode that builds to a babyface turn for Harley. Spoiler alert, which is shocking, I know, but I think it actually, like, makes sense for the character to go on this journey to realize that she's never wanted to be a bad guy. So there's multiple things going on. It's like you're learning a lot about Bruce, but you're also learning about Harley, because, like, she's embracing this role, you know what I mean, to be this therapist for young Bruce in his head. And then once she does that, she starts to realize, hey, she likes to help people. So there's all these different things going on that kind of tie into where they want to build the characters up, to the point where I want to see Harley be a part of the Bat family now, and I'm probably going to get that in season 4. But yeah, that visual of them teaming up after all this shit they go through in Batman's head, the revelation that she finds out he's Batman, you know, all that stuff just builds to this great turn, I think. And I think this episode is so key to that, you know what I mean? And it's just, And I love it when, like I said, I love it when Dr. Psycho comes in and then they go in someone's head. It's just so perfect for what they want to do and the stories that you want to tell in this, because this series is all about like, dealing with your shit, like you said. Like if you look at the Joker, he's not even like a villain anymore. He's more like a social, I don't know, like a social superhero or something like that. He's kind of like a socialist, and you know what I mean. Now he took over Gotham, and now he's doing these socialist things. So all these characters have these different kind of changes in them, and it's so refreshing for the Batman era, because like at the beginning of this series, I would have never thought that Harley Quinn would be a part of the Bat family, being a crime fighter, and now it's set it up perfectly. And now we're like, oh shit, maybe Poison Ivy's the one that is a little bit too psycho now. But yeah, it's just crazy that they went through all this to have this kind of journey. And I thought that like Poison Ivy and Harley, their relationship, the big turn at the end when they got together at the season 2, I thought, okay, this is kind of like the climax. Where do you go from here? And they just expanded on it and just built on it, and everything just kind of works. And I even like with what they did with King Shark this season. So they kind of brought a different side of King Shark out, and that was kind of cool as well. And of course, Clayface, like I mentioned, you know, the whole thing with Thomas Wayne and him killing Billy Bob Thornton on accident. Oh, I'm sorry. He put him in a room with a tiger, and the tiger killed Billy Bob Thornton on accident, and then taking over Billy Bob Thornton's life. Very fucked up, but again, this is what this show is. It's like all these different fucked up things about the Batman universe thrown back at you, and they laugh about it.
So Harley Quinn does make reference to her past self, and kind of this episode has many, many gestures to Batman the Animated Series, alluding to her New York accent. We get a bit of her in her old costume. The inside of Bruce's mind is literally the Batman the Animated Series palette, so to speak. And the good news is there's not a lot of self-flagellation about it. If you don't know it, then it's not something you're necessarily going to miss. But it's a really good Easter egg. And again, so much of this really is about just exploring what happens here. And they even got somebody who used to work under Danny Elfman, Jefferson Freeman, to do the score. Brian also mentioned the homages to Frasier, the intro and closing credits being homages to those sequences. Harley mentioning that she learned psychology from watching the show. Dr. Psycho acting as a radio psychologist who takes calls from listeners. So yeah, there's a lot of 90s going on. Of course, Batman Forever is a movie from the 90s. So yeah, again, Brian, 1995 continuing to prove very influential in the Batverse between Seven, between Heat, Frasier, and of course Batman Forever.
Yeah, 95 and Batman just seem to go together. I don't know what it is. It's not even like the height of like Batman mania, I think. So it's just very strange because like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of other great movies from 95. Apollo 13. Is there going to be a Batman movie based on like Apollo 13? Is Batman going to go into space and he's not going to have enough oxygen or something like that? But or they're going to do a Toy Story Batman? Who knows? I mean, we got a Lego Batman, right? So yeah, just great homages. And I just want to really quickly point out that I think Diedrich Bader is definitely like the number 2 voice of Batman for sure. Kevin Conroy, obviously number 1. And, I don't know if he had the offer to do this part, but it doesn't make sense anyway, because Diedrich Bader is just the voice of Batman for the show anyway. But it would have been interesting if you got him for like, some kind of cameo voice inside a Batman set. Because, this was when he was still alive. So it's unfortunate they couldn't like tie that together, but that would have been really, really cool. But yeah, I love the whole Batman the Animated Series motif in his head. They got the music down. I think even the animation style even adapts even more, because like the animation style in the Harley Quinn show is like a mix of Batman the Animated Series mixed with like Superman the Animated Series mixed with like the modern Justice League type movies to give it that modern kind of look. But this kind of like leaned towards the more 90s look even more so, with the shadows and the high angles and stuff like that. So it was just, a lot of fun. And they even like put in little details of like the Batman Begins stuff, where at one point they fall into a well, like Batman and Batman Begins. And of course they show the clip of, "Why do we fall, Master Bruce? So we can pick ourselves back up again."
Yeah, I know you really love that. You really love that moment, and it's of course it's classic Batman at this point, given that movie is almost 20 years old. But let's get to the categories. Like I said, this is probably not going to be as long of an episode as usual, but there's still some stuff to discuss. So in terms of the heroes, of course, our focus is around Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy, Clayface, the usual gang, a little bit of Catwoman. This is not really as focused of an episode on Ivy and Harley Quinn, but this is about Harley Quinn being a therapist again and becoming one of the first people to understand Bruce Wayne. I think that's really powerful. If this episode was just about Bruce Wayne's exploration, I don't think this would be under consideration. But like this does lead to the idea of Harley Quinn is still the main character of her show, as she should be. And I think that Kaylee Cuoco doesn't get enough credit for the voice work here. This is not a famous Hollywood actress just half-assing it. She does a tremendous job here uh, in this episode specifically, and really overall. I think her performance has just gotten better and better. I think she was good in the first season, but by this point, she's got the voice down. It's definitely not Arlene Sorkin, but it is something different, and I really think she does a tremendous job. And you know, this is a very tough role because so many people have done it at this point, but Kaylee Cuoco has made it her own. And an episode like this really allows Harley Quinn, this version of Harley Quinn, to stand out. And I give them a lot of credit for that. And again, Harley Quinn started as an animated character, and I know that she has been a part of the comics and some of the video games, but I think it's really, really fitting that her character evolution has happened on screen. So much of her best moments have truly happened in a TV show like this, and I think that's really cool. And I think back to the Batman versus Harley Quinn movie that was really, really bad, and this in so many ways feels it's not a response to it, but it really makes you appreciate what they did here and what they didn't do in that movie, which was just awful. And for me, this is about Harley Quinn and the rest of the characters. I think Clayface is funny. I'm a huge fan of Lake Bell as Poison Ivy. Doesn't get a lot to do here, but in my mind, this is about Harley Quinn. This is about the voice performance, and for me, I give this a 9.
Yeah, I'm giving a 9 as well for the heroes category. And you mentioned the voice work and the fact that she put on the New York heavy accent in the flashback in Bruce's mind while talking to herself. And like it's totally different tones of voice, and it's like totally clear that like one voice is a representation of maturity and growth, while the other one represents like, oh man, you really don't have any self-respect for yourself, and like you really just like really attached to the Joker to the hip. And that was that contrast. And I think it's like this, wow, it's like, yeah, we never noticed her voice change so much like that, because I think in the season 1 it's even more closer to that New York heavy accent. And then once you see this episode, it's clear like, oh, she is totally grown as a human being and as a person. And it's clear by the way she talks, because it's like if you hear certain people talk in a certain way and it's more like a childlike kind of voice, there's something to that. And the way that Harley's voice has evolved from that childlike voice to a more an adult, stern kind of voice that's more confident in herself, I think that speaks of volumes to the character and what she's done with the character in terms of the voice work. And I mean, in terms of the voice work, comparing season by season, this is definitely the best of the 3 seasons I've seen. And yeah, I just love that scene where she's talking to herself. And it's just great because it's that contrast, you know, and it's like it's right there in front of you, the old and the new, and like what you can do, like not just as a character, but as a human being, evolve yourself if you just deal with your shit. And I think that's a great representation. And the way that she handles a young Bruce Wayne, you know what I mean? And just like acting like not a mother, but like an actual doctor, therapist, treating their patient. And the whole like, do you give me your consent to give you, you know, as a you know, do you give me consent to be your doctor? And I thought was like, oh wow, that's such that's such a respectable thing to do. So even with all that, it was great. And I think a 9 is like the right score for her. 10 would have been like a movie when you got this whole character arc thing going on, but because it's a show, it's kind of limited, so that's why it gets a 9 for me.
So the villain is Batman. Batman refuses to go to therapy, and this is what happens. I know that you are a huge Diedrich Bader fan, so I'm going to let you expound your thoughts before I even give my score. Diedrich Bader as Batman, go.
It's like he can do like depressed Batman. He can do happy-go-lucky Batman with Brave and the Bold, and I love that show so much. Like it's one of my favorite Batman shows. Like it's that Batman the Animated Series, Brave and the Bold, and the Justice League run are like my three favorite Batman shows. And yeah, he's just so diverse. You know what I mean? He can do it all in terms of that Batman role. He can be a great Bruce Wayne. He can be a funny Bruce Wayne. You know what I mean? And like he can do that like 60s style of Batman as well. And we've seen it on The Brave and the Bold. So his variety and range as Batman is just so like underappreciated, undervalued. Because like Kevin Conroy doesn't necessarily do the comedy stuff, or when he did the comedy stuff with Batman, he was always serious. Very rare if he did comedy stuff. But like I said, Diedrich Bader comes from that sitcom background. He's that great. It's not a cameo, but it's a small role in Office Space that everyone remembers. I think he's just so underappreciated as Batman. You know what I mean? It's like no one really talks about him as much because Kevin Conroy is always like the top G. You know what I mean? But I feel like he has done the work in the last 10, 15 years as the voice of Batman. Kind of like, I guess more of like a passing of the torch from Kevin Conroy, but still, I feel like he's the go-to guy, and I think he should be more games. Like he should be a go-to now instead of Kevin Conroy because he was the go-to. But I think it's just so underappreciated. And here, it's like he's being serious and funny at the same time, but it's like dark because he's talking about bringing his parents back to life. So it's very fucked up. It's like dark and very fucked up, but he's pulling it off. You know what I mean? And he's doing it so well, and he's doing the comedy right. And he's getting the empathy from you, even though you're like, dude, Batman, what are you doing right now? You can't raise your parents from the dead. Please don't do this. And of course it fucks up. But, he's very good in this. I'll give it an 8 because I felt like he could have played it a little darker, especially when he was the voice of Joe Cool, which we'll get into. But, because he could have gone a little grittier and darker with that, but he just ended up doing the normal Batman voice. So that was interesting.
I can't believe I'm giving this a higher score than you. I'm giving this a 9. I mean, I think that because this episode is so centrally focused around him, and just some great moments as well. I mean, you mentioned Diedrich Bader, and of course he's an important part, but even the actor whose name I do not have in front of me who played the young Bruce Wayne, I think he does a very good job as well, and it should not be underestimated.
I got it. Jack Stanton.
I mean, I think he does a really good job too. So I want to give him some credit as well, and just what they're able to build throughout this episode, because I think it starts out funny and it starts out like almost bordering on self-parody, but they're really able to evolve it to where like the parents' death actually means something and isn't a punchline or like, here we go again. Like it actually means something. And I think a lot of the voice work across the board helps that, but specifically I think about Diedrich Bader and the actor who played young Bruce Wayne. Just really good stuff. I'm giving this a 9.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with an 8. I just felt like they could have gone a little crazier with the Joe Cool, because when you see Joe Cool, it's like, oh, it's clearly gonna be Bruce Wayne behind the mask. It's metaphorical, but he could have played it up a little more. You know what I mean? Like I was expecting a little bit kind of like a darker tone. But other than that, I still think it's great. I think in a full-length movie, it would have been a 9 or a 10.
In terms of the story, so the reason that they're even going into Bruce Wayne's mind is because they're trying to find out where Frank is, and they're torturing him, and they're trying to kill him, seemingly, but Bruce is not budging, and they decide to recruit Dr. Psycho, who's been persona non grata, and they bring him to help get them into their minds. King Shark decides to guard the bodies, which is pretty amusing. I mean, I think it would be hard for this episode to have King Shark in Bruce Wayne's mind and still be able to take it seriously. So I get that motivation. They are dropped into Crime Alley, and we get the long loop of Bruce Wayne's parents getting murdered, and Harley and Psycho, they basically figure out that Bruce has blocked out all of his memories except for this one. A funny subplot is Clayface trying to interview the multiple Tom Waynes as research for the movie. But Joe Chill is always there to kill Thomas and Martha before he has the chance to get the answers. And they're kind of going through this. And I know you really appreciate the James Gunn of it all. And, we get to kind of the end of the episode, and we get Harley bonding with both the adult Batman and the younger Batman. And she seemingly is able to figure things out, and seemingly is ready to help him. And they enter the Wayne Mansion on the final Christmas before before his parents' death. As they hide from Joe Chill in a closet, young Bruce expresses his trust in Harley. This is a very big moment. He confesses that he took Frank at first to thwart Ivy's plans, but is going to re-engineer him to resurrect humans. Bruce intends to revive his parents and rid himself of his demons by doing this. Joe Chill is not Joe Chill, but it's just adult Bruce, and elaborates on his younger self's woes. And in the end, Bruce Wayne, we see going to inject the graves with the serum, and a horrific beast emerges kind of as the episode ends. And this is a very busy 22 minutes. Again, you're basically talking about a broadcast length show, and the fact that they're able to get so much of this across is so impressive. And I think that just the way that they executed it, the visuals, everything put together, I'm also giving this a 9.
Yeah, I'm giving the story a 9. It's so great. I wish this was like a full-length movie, like I've mentioned before, because like there could be so much more detail to this. What I think they forgot to kind of mention with this, I think to me it's like survivor's guilt. That's what my interpretation of this is, because the whole idea is Bruce's parents, right? Like that night they were supposed to go to some like business meeting, and Thomas wanted to take his son. And that's kind of that symbolism of the father and the son. You know what I mean? Like handing down passing the torch to your son. You're going to be the one taking over my corporation one day, blah, blah, blah. But he still wants to have like a childhood. So he wants to go to the movies instead. And that's kind of that split between, Bruce Wayne, as a kid, like, growing up, just having a normal life versus growing up in this corporate world and, being what your father wants you to be kind of thing. I think there was more deep stuff to that they all like, they could have gone even deeper. You know what I mean? And like, there's a lot of deep symbolism there, especially the idea that he was supposed to go to a business meeting that night. I like that little detail that kind of shapes what Bruce Wayne is, because he realizes he's going to have to be Bruce Wayne and be this corporate figure that his father was, but also, again, in the shadows, put on the mask and deal with his guilt in a fucked up way. So that's kind of my interpretation of it. And they mentioned like the Zorro thing, and of course Zorro, has always been like that movie in the background in Crime Alley. So I like that detail. And of course, they're always going to keep that detail. But now with the whole perspective of it all, I think this kind of adds a little to it. Because I don't think they added the detail that they were supposed to be like a business meeting. Then I think this is one of those newer details they added for the story to make it to emphasize it and kind of make it, spice it up a bit. Because I swear that little detail adds a lot to it, and it's all about fathers and sons in my eyes at that point. Even with Martha Wayne there, it's just like this idea of you were supposed to be the one to take over my shoes. You know what I mean? And that goes out the window, so that adds to the guilt. So there's a lot going on there that, I was picking up on that not a lot of people were picking up on. And then, of course, little off topic, but the whole Joe Chill thing, so spot on, because I, too, as a kid, was confused. I thought Joe Cool was the guy from the Marlboro ads, the smoking camel, but that's Joe Camel, and Joe Cool's actually Snoopy's alter ego when he's really being cool. And I thought it was just Snoopy. So there you go, which explains all the Joe Cool signs at Knott's Berry Farm, which I kind of just blocked out of my mind, I guess, and didn't make any sense of it. Now it all makes sense. So Joe Cool is not the smoking camel.
He is certainly not. But yeah, it's, I think because of the lore, so to speak, kind of getting jumbled up, it's tough to remember. But yeah, Joe Chill is the ultimate reason for Batman's existence. So yeah, that's what it comes down to. Let's talk about the technical aspects. And again, I think this is also really strong. And when we're assessing the technical aspects, I think we are putting it in the context of the form. So I think what we're evaluating here is, like, I think it captures Batman the Animated Series, again, without becoming self-flagellation. I think it makes a lot of sense. The way that they do the looping, I think, is really creative and really well done. Again, keeping it to the style of the Harley Quinn animated series. I also have to say that the way they capture the score is really great. A lot of good repetition, consistently good editing. And again, this is a 22-minute episode, but they get a lot done in those 22 minutes. So for those reasons, I am also giving this a 9.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. And what really made it a 9 instead of an 8 for me is the littlest detail. I know it's really like insignificant to some people, but the lightning flashing. You know what I mean? Like that is so specific to Batman the Animated Series that when they did it here, I was like, oh, the little details. It's the little details that kind of like win you over sometimes. I'm like, God, they even did the lightning effect. So that's what really put it over the top for me. Like you already mentioned the music. I already mentioned how like the animation style steps up once they go into Bruce Wayne's head. The animation looks even better than the outside world, I think, personally. But again, it's because they were trying to throw back to the older style in the modern style. So they're kind of mixing the two. But I swear, like the littlest detail with that lightning really got me. And I also like the in the flashback too, in when they were looking at that old memory of Bruce and old Harley Quinn and Joker and all that. The detail there with like how it's lit at night, because the way that the Batman the Animated Series is lit for night shots, it's like this crazy lighting where everything seems like bright but so dark in the distance, and they just got that lighting right. So I'm glad they went back to that, and it just makes me wish they kind of bring back Batman the Animated Series again. But again, that storyline has been done because they're way past that. So they can't even do any more stories with that storyline anymore, I don't think, because of what happened in Justice League. So it was just cool to have that feeling again. You know what I mean?
For sure. So I don't even need to know. I don't think we even need to do the legacy because unless it's a disastrous score, this is going into the Pantheon. But for me, I'm giving this an 8. I think Harley Quinn has established itself as one of the more popular shows on Max. I mean, look, we don't have exact ratings, but the fact that this has gotten to a 4th season says a lot, and it is heavily promoted. I see it in the top 10 quite a bit. So I'm going to assume it's popular, but this is also in my mind, this is more so than the movies, the definitive examination of the Batman mythos, and further establishes Harley Quinn as one of the most important characters in this universe. And that's pretty crazy to me, just how relevant she's become in such a short amount of time. But it's true. I really do think that other than Batman and the Joker, Harley Quinn might be number 3. Like, I don't even see the argument for Robin at this point. Like, to me, it's maybe Catwoman because of the Batman and some of the chemistry they had, but I don't know, man. Harley Quinn is up there, and it's remarkable that in 30 years that she has become so relevant. When she was the Joker's sidekick, she wasn't even Batman's sidekick. She was the Joker's sidekick, and now I think she is arguably as popular, if not more so.
I would agree. I'm going to give it a 7 right now, just because I feel like there wasn't so much water cooler talk about this season in particular. I remember when the season 1 and 2 came out, there was like buzz about it. Like me and my friends were like really into it. And then when season 3 came out, maybe it was just too much of a gap. Because I didn't even watch season 3 until recently, and I'm going to watch season 4 like that really quick. You know what I mean? Because they dropped, I think the last episode dropped recently. So I'll be all caught up and stuff. But I just felt like there wasn't the buzz that the first 2 seasons had. And usually there's like a water cooler talk about a specific episode like this one where it just stands out. Like, for instance, when we talk about Watchmen, I think one of the standout episodes is one of the flashback black and white one, right? And that's a lot, like a big stand. Like, I remember people talking specifically about that Watchmen episode specifically. So in this case, it's not necessarily that, but there is still like a slight buzz on this show. And you mentioned like, there's season 4. I bet season 5 is going to come out. And yeah, I think in hindsight, years from now, if Harley becomes an on-screen hero, like in a movie, I would say it's because of this particular episode that sparked that idea. Because clearly, like, even with that image of her in the Robin suit, I was like, God, that's so cool. Like, I would be so for that. And, maybe she'll eventually get to that point where she has like a Robin hybrid type costume. But I can totally picture her being a Robin down the line. And I think this episode will be the origin of that, but we're not quite there yet. So over time, this score can obviously grow, but right now it's a 7 for me.
Yeah, I'm settling on an 8 in terms of the legacy score, and my total is a 44.
42 for me, so that's clearly in the pantheon.
So yes, the total score is 86. So congratulations to Harley Quinn, season 3, episode 8, Batman Begins Forever. Fittingly is going to be one of the few TV shows. The only other TV show to make it is the first season of Watchmen, which Brian referenced earlier, talking about the black and white episode. And it's pretty remarkable to think. And we're going to be, we'll certainly be talking about some TV as we go. But just know that in my mind, this and Watchmen, I mean, this really deserves it. And I think it's hard for TV to get in, just because I don't think it has the cultural relevance that legacy score. I think it's pretty difficult, but in my mind, I think this is an episode that's going to stand the test of time and be regarded as something truly important in terms of the Batman lore, so to speak. Anything else, Brian, before we go into a shortened version, only 2 burning questions, because this is a TV episode?
Well, I'm going to add one bonus one that I already texted you earlier. Well, I'm going to add that as number 3. But overall, I'd say season 3 as a whole, highly recommend it. I think it gets off to a little bit of a rough start with the first 2 episodes, but then it gets going really well. And it sucks because I wanted more Kite Man, but I get the whole, we had to cut him kind of almost out of completely. He was in 1 episode. So, but I love, again, Bane, just hilarious every time he's on screen. That voice is so great. Yeah, there's so much going on for this show. I love it a lot. Season 3 overall, I give an 8.5 out of 10. Kind of on par with seasons 1 and 2. And that's kind of where I'm at, but it's going to be hard because season 4 of here is not nearly as good, which is disappointing, but you never know. I mean, from a certain perspective, I could find it to be the best season, so you never know.
For sure. Yeah, I will give my thoughts on season 3 as well. I think that I'm not sure. It's a tough season to evaluate because I think the first 2 seasons were so perfect together. It really felt like they told kind of one story over 26 episodes. And with season 3, like, it's very clear this is not part of the original plan. And I think it suffers a little bit because of that. And I think that you can see the showrunners kind of shifting. Ultimately, the show. So you're not going to believe this, Brian, but the showrunners of Harley Quinn are also executive producers on Abbott Elementary. And because Quinta Brunson is kind of the writer, but she's also the star, the producers of Harley Quinn transitioned over and now are essentially doing a lot of the maintenance work on Abbott Elementary, and they've kind of handed the ball off to new showrunners. And I think season 3 and season 4 both have suffered a little bit. I don't think seasons 3 and 4 are nearly as good. They're still pretty good and still very watchable, but I don't think it has been as good. But I think this episode really brings season 3 together, and I still think season 3 is really, really strong. So yeah, I'm not sure if I would go 8.5. I'd probably go 7.5 or 8, but it's very, very good. So let's get to the burning questions. Can we agree Batman's parents should never die on screen again? I say yes.
Yes, and I get this weird feeling that we might see a clip of it in the Batman 2 or something. I just get this weird feeling. I hope not.
Absolutely begging not to. Please.
I don't know.
I feel like Matt Reeves is smart enough to not do that.
I hope so too, but I get this feeling that some stupid Warner Brothers executive could be like, some people don't all know the Batman origin story. We gotta have some kind of reference.
And look, as long as James Gunn is in charge, and who knows how long that's going to be, I very much feel like I feel like there is a barrier that's there and I am sincerely hopeful that we do not have to deal with this crap. So let's never see the parents die on screen again. Let this be the final word. Was season 3 of Harley Quinn the best season? I will say, I think it's season 2. I think season 2 is really, really good. And in a world where we had more time, I would say we go back and actually maybe consider season 2 for the Pantheon, but we do have a limited amount of time and space to fit these episodes in. So it's going to be tough. But for me, season 2 is the best. But I think this is easily the best episode.
I would say season 2 slightly edges it out, and I would say this is the best episode of the first 3 seasons. But season 2 overall, I mean, because I think it had the turn, like the idea that Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy would become a couple. Like, I think people were kind of expecting it, but then some people were not expecting it, and I think those people that didn't have those expectations, it worked better on them. And I kind of saw it coming, but that's part of the story. But yeah, I would say season 2 slightly edges it because that's also where Joker does this like socialist turn as well, where he's only focused on his stepkids. So I thought that's also fascinating, and that kind of starts in season 2 as well.
All right, Brian, what's your bonus question?
Okay, so in the episode, they mentioned that Dr. Psycho is competing for ratings in the podcast wars with Killer Croc, and I kept thinking, like, what would be your choice of podcast, Killer Croc or Dr. Psycho? I would have to go with Dr. Psycho because I'm used to that formula of call-in, but I can imagine Killer Croc being this dark podcast where it's just so depressing because it's like a biography.
See, the problem is that Dr. Psycho is going to veer into Joe Rogan territory, and I absolutely cannot stand Joe Rogan. I feel like it would get into like men's rights and conspiracy theories and anti-vax crap. So I'm going to go with Killer Croc. Neither podcast would be ideal, but I feel like Killer Croc's would be a little better.
There you go. That was my burning question because when I saw that, I was like, dude, I would totally go with Dr. Psycho in terms of those two, because Killer Croc, man, that has to be one of the most depressing podcasts in the Batman universe, bar none. Because that dude is just always living in the sewer and never has any sunlight, so that's got to affect your personality really terribly.
All right, so that is it for this episode. Next week, we are going to be doing a lightning round of DC movies. These are movies that we feel are not necessarily worth a full conversation. They are worth some brief conversation. So for each of these movies, we're going to be spending about 5 to 10 minutes discussing them. And I am going to put a 10-minute time limit on our discussions of each. I will literally be timing it, so we will not go longer than 10 minutes on any of these movies. So the movies are as follows. We are going to be talking about Wonder Woman 1984, The Suicide Squad, Black Adam, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, The Flash, and Blue Beetle. I think I got them all, right?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's about it. I think I'm missing. Are we missing? Oh, no, we're not counting the Joker for reference, people.
The Joker is not a superhero movie, so we are not counting it, but we will be offering our brief thoughts, maybe give some scores, and that is it. But Brian has some homework to do before we get there, so have fun watching one of the movies on this list. I know you're looking forward to it.
Fury of the Gods, man. I so disinterested, but hey, Helen Mirren's in it, and the return of Lucy Liu, so that's what it's got going for it, I guess. I don't know.
All right, so thank you so much for listening. Again, we will talk to you again next week for the DC Carousel, I guess. Have a great week.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Only Lex Luthor would design underwear based on Superman.